Welcome, everybody, to another edition of Inside Boxing Weekly. I'm your host for the week, Jeremiah J. Preisser. Mike's on vacation for the night. I want to welcome in my co-host for tonight, John Einreinhofer. How you doing, man?
Good to be here, Jeremiah. We got a lot to talk about, so we're going to have a good podcast here tonight.
Definitely, yeah, a lot going on and a lot to talk about. Real quickly, I want to plug in our sponsors, Power Plus Mouth Guards and Replenishing Care Technologies. Let's move on to the bantamweight fight that isn't getting a lot of attention, but you and I think it's significant because Yamanaka was the champion at bantamweight in the original 8 division, and Luis Nery, a 24-year-old Mexican, upset the apple cart there. What do you think of that fight?
It was a very interesting development. Of course, Yamanaka, 34 years old for the weight class, but I recognized him, as the bantamweight champion with, if you had 17 divisions, also in my original 8 and 8 divisions, I thought he had done enough, and he was the champion. So I think, and he was on most pound-for-pound lists on the fringe, about number 10 there. So he had earned his status, with the elite of the sport, really, when you look at it. A lot of times people don't look at the lower divisions, especially below featherweight a lot. But, Yamanaka was there. Nery was on my radar screen. He didn't crack my original 8, the top 10, but he was in my mentions. He was undefeated in a puncher. And, what was interesting is as part of your analysis of fights, when you're trying to make predictions, which we all like to do, you have to, some people won't accept this, but you just have to look at the odds as at least a heavy part of your analysis. And why I mentioned that with Nery and Yamanaka before we get into the fight itself was what I found sort of fascinating was Yamanaka was undefeated and a longtime champion, recognized as bantamweight champion, but the odds makers had Nery a slight favorite just about 6-7 hours before the fight. Yamanaka had on some been a slight favorite, then it was about even money, and it kind of came in with Nery as a slight favorite, and he ended up scoring an early knockout. So you had quote-unquote knowledgeable observers talking post-fight about the shock of the result, and I'm not saying I was going in there definitely picking Nery or anything like that. I didn't quite have a pick on that fight going in either way. But, it wasn't a shock for the odds makers. So I thought that was interesting. But the stoppage of the fight was strange.
Yeah, well, and I've got to credit Nery because a lot of my knowledgeable Japanese friends, they still had Yamanaka winning clearly. And I don't mean the fight itself. I mean going into the fight. But yeah, Yamanaka was the bantamweight champion, and he was around for a long time. And one thing that impressed me about Nery is, not only was he fairly accurate with his left hand. I don't know if Yamanaka was just kind of struggling to have. I don't know if he was struggling stylistically with the southpaw. Cause I remember his fight against Victor Chinian, and he didn't look as comfortable there as he looked against some other, against most of the orthodox fights that he had. But then again, he did fight Moreno. I did think Moreno beat him in the first fight, but then they had the rematch, and he ended up stopping Moreno. And I thought that was a damn good victory. Moreno's a little long in the tooth, but it was still a good win. But I've got to get a lot of credit to Nery because a lot of people didn't know who he was prior to this. He was on a lot of the hardcore fans' radar, but I just don't know very many people who picked Nery. In fact, I don't think I know anybody who picked Nery. But congratulations to him. He is now the bantamweight champion. Just a quick question: do you think he cracks any pound-for-pound list because of this win?
I don't think because of Yamanaka's age, he'll replace him on the pound-for-pound list. That's one of those situations where I don't think he does. But, with the punching power he's shown so far and that he stopped Yamanaka and he's an undefeated puncher, he's probably a guy on the cusp. One more good win like that, and he would be a contender for that. What I find intriguing is that, he is Mexican, and maybe this opens up some other fights. We've got this superfly thing going on. The 3 pounds beneath the traditional bantamweight division, there's absolutely no need for that division. But we all know that the reality is there's a lot of good fighters fighting in that division right now. the Superfly card is just good to me to sort some of that out. The thing that to me would jump out immediately is, at the very least, the matchup between Estrada and Quadras. They're both Mexicans also. Maybe that could lead into a Neary fight after that, and that would be a good fight for Neary to keep his name on the radar screen. But
I am
champion now. There's no doubt about it. He's my bantamweight champion. In an weight context, he earned it. So
he's the man. Yeah, I'd love to see any one of those fights against one of his fellow Mexicans. Anyways, on to the big card, the one that everybody is talking about, the one headlined by Terrence Crawford and Julius Indongo. I'm going to skip the Mike Reed fight against Rob Frankel, who's actually a local tough guy. Rob, trying to remember what his nickname is, Red Hot Frankel. I'm going to go with the Dillian White and Brian Jennings fight. I'm just going to kind of put them together because on their own, I don't think they're worth talking about because both these opponents looked overmatched to me. White and Jennings is just trying to get back in the groove of things. White is trying to stay relevant. I know he's targeting a Wilder fight, so I'm not too concerned with the results themselves. I thought the opponents were overmatched, but where do you see both of them going after this?
They were both in mismatches. I don't think either of these guys, frankly, is going to be a factor. They're going to be opponents for guys that are going to be factors. I think that's where it's headed for Bryant Jennings and Dillian White. I don't. There's been talk of a Wilder White fight. I think Wilder would knock out White. Bryant Jennings. He got blown out by Ortiz. He was able to go the distance with Vladimir Klitschko, but with what happened to Vladimir Klitschko afterwards, and Tyson Fury fight and the Joshua fight, that merely going the distance isn't really looking that great in hindsight. One of Jennings' other wins was over Szpilka. We've seen Szpilka now get knocked out by Wilder and Konachki recently. So, I'm not, Bryant Jennings, he's a tough guy. He came to boxing later and, worked his way up, and now he's been off for a while. And Dillian White's not a bad fighter, but I just think these are, at best, fringe guys. In other words, these are guys struggling to break into the top 10 and probably not quite making it, and they're going to end up being opponents. This is I've got a problem, with the card. Boxing in the modern era, and of course, it's a dangerous sport, as we all know, so you can't ask the fighters really to fight too often, but, they're considering they're not as active as they used to be. I just look at it as, fighters are going to fight twice a year. Jennings has been off for a long time, even some of it was promotional. But, we can't have these kind of mismatches. I mean, this whole top-ranked card from top to bottom, as we're going to go through it all, though, it was just a night of mismatches, which I think if you've got fighters fighting, especially, twice a year, we can't, as fans and as a sport, keep having these kind of mismatches.
I agree, definitely. Well, I mean, and Bob Arum, unfortunately, has been pretty well known for these sorts of cards over the years. It's just not appealing as a fan. You got to give us something, to whet our appetites, and this just doesn't do it. I mean, but my guess, if I'm going to throw it out there, I think Brian Jennings is probably being lined up for a guy like Joseph Parker if he gets past, Fury. Which I don't think is a given. Looking at the early odds for it, well, before it came off the last time, that's not a given, but that's my guess. If Brian Jennings is going to get anybody, he's going to get Parker, and I really wouldn't be surprised to see Dillian White get Deontay Wilder. But to Wilder's credit, I actually think he's shooting a bit higher. I know him and a lot of the others, Luis Ortiz, they want Anthony Joshua. I just don't think he'll be available at least this year. So I don't know where Wilder's fitting in. I'm not exactly sure how all that's going to play out, but I wouldn't be surprised to see White get Wilder, and I wouldn't be surprised to see Jennings get Parker.
Yeah, I wouldn't either. I think that, you hear rumors and there's some degree of sense. Parker's stock is falling like a rock, as we've discussed. And that's a fight that Bryant Jennings can be competitive in that fight. That's not Joseph Parker's not an unwinnable fight for him. I'm not saying if I would pick him or not, but that's one guy in the legit top 10 that he could get in with and maybe have a shot. I don't know if he would against some of the others. White, I figured, it's a tie-in with, if Wilder is going to eventually fight Joshua, that, it'll add interest in the UK if Wilder fights White first. But I don't think, frankly, we need all this build-up. I mean, you've got, let's look at this in theory. You've got, Canelo, Alvarez, and Golovkin are going to fight on September 16th. That's early fall. Nothing huge has been slated for the later part of the fall just yet. What I'm getting to is why can't I'm not saying we're getting it, but why can't Anthony Joshua and Deontay Wilder fight, in October, November, or December? I mean, Joshua doesn't have a fight now with Klitschko gone. Wilder, is always being asked to step up. He needs a big fight. They both fight on Showtime. I mean, there's no need for weight or build up here. They could fight now. We don't need the mismatches. No one needs to see Anthony Joshua against Kubrat Pulev. And the IBF thing is just a smoke screen. That's how the alphabet things are used to sell fans. Oh, well, he's got to fight Pulev to keep his belt. No, he doesn't. We don't need to see Anthony Joshua fight Pulev. We know Anthony Joshua is the number 1 ranked heavyweight right now. And to me, Wilder's too. He doesn't need to affirm that status against Pulev.
Right, I agree, and unfortunately, we have to deal with the stupid political stuff that goes on with the IBF, WBA. The WBA is like, now you have to fight Luis Ortiz. That's actually what I would prefer. Over Pulev, that is. But the IBF pulled a fast one on Fury too, where they stripped him pretty quickly. They let Joshua negotiate. I don't really care. I just want to see the best fights. I think Wilder, again, to his credit, I think he's shooting bigger. But imagine, I wouldn't be surprised at all. Granted, Wilder and Joshua keep winning, to see Wilder and Joshua finally get it on probably late next year. I mean, it's such a painstaking process that the stuff's slow as molasses. I mean, frankly, I'm just kind of tired of dealing with it. But let's imagine that Joshua honors his first 2 mandatory defenses. Okay, I know we hate the trinkets. I don't really even like talking about this. But let's imagine that he does, because Joshua and Hearns, they're working within the modern framework. Let's imagine that Deontay Wilder gets Joshua late next year. What does Wilder do in the meantime? Who can he fight?
I think Wilder, Al Heyman, as we know, it doesn't mean he's perfect either, but he pretty much obviously knows what he's doing. I think they see Luis Ortiz, who is with Heyman now. I think they see him as a respected opponent. He is in everybody's, really top 3 at this point. Vladimir Klitschko has retired. That, at his age, and he hasn't looked good in his last couple of fights, I think they look at him as a winnable fight for Wilder, where, the fans would give Wilder added respect going into a Joshua fight and maybe enable it to even be a bigger seller. That's my gut feeling. And Ortiz, of course, is no automatic for Wilder, and he's got enough power, especially in the heavyweight division, to be dangerous, and he's a southpaw. But I think they've got that right. I think it's the right time to take on Luis Ortiz before his stock has dropped significantly, and he's obviously he's in his later 30s. I think that might be the fight they're looking at. You hear about the White thing, but I wouldn't be surprised if they went through with the Luis Ortiz fight.
Yeah, I would love that, because it would kind of streamline the process. I mean, if Wilder could potentially get past Ortiz and then Joshua get past Pulev, well, then you could make it early next year. Anyways, let's hope. I mean, with boxing, it's hard to say anything. But I'm going to move on to the Mike Alvarado fight. Alvarado, I'm from Denver. For those who are unaware, we don't have a lot of world class fighters coming out of here. Boxing is not big out here. Of course, it exists, but we just don't have the population or really the drive to produce world champion after world champion. So we just got to wait for our Stevie Johnsons and Ron Lyles and Mike Alvarados of the world. But Alvarado's been on a comeback for a few years now. Apparently he's gotten his life together. Again, for those unaware, Alvarado's had some personal problems over and over again. But now he's on a comeback. He's trying to get into he's trying to go to Titletown. Unfortunately, I don't think he's going to succeed there. But I've got to say that the knockout was really good.
You got a highlight reel knockout, but I just can't. After his last fight with Rios, I know it's in the past, and he's had the problems, but I can't buy in. I just can't buy into Mike Alvarado at this point. But hey, he helped his cause. He got a highlight reel knockout that kept getting run on SportsCenter, and in this modern era, that could be enough. I did see Keith Idec say that, he's very knowledgeable. I just saw on Twitter after the fight, he was saying, I hope to God that Alvarado and Crawford doesn't come off. And we're dealing with Top Rank. So I think I could feel for his sentiments there that if that's being talked about, and we know what Top Rank's capable of doing, let's hope to God that is not the Terrence Crawford 147-pound debut.
Oh my God, that would be slaughter, and I don't think any of us would like to see that. I wouldn't be surprised though. I mean, and we all know this, that Crawford is moving up. He's under Bob Arum's promotional banner. He may get somebody like Jesse Vargas. I wouldn't be surprised to see Vargas kind of thrown like a lamb to slaughter. But we'll get to Crawford here in a minute. Anyways, highlight reel knockout by Mike Alvarado. I enjoyed it. He's a guy from Colorado, so I got to pay attention. Did you end up seeing Shakur Stevenson versus David Paz?
I did, and it's a good segue there, Jeremiah, because you're a Colorado native. Of course, I'm originally from New Jersey, and Shakur Stevenson is from Newark, so he's been on the radar screen there for a long time. Of course, he had a top amateur career. He did have one of the best American amateur careers for a long time, silver medal in the Olympics, and that was great to see the American amateurs at least coming back a little. But I've got in the realm of having to call him like to see him, I just didn't think Stevenson looked good. Of course, he's only 20 years old, and but there's a lot of good fighters in the featherweight division right now, and there's a lot of tough customers you'll eventually have to get through, and you don't want to go too far in these early fights, but there were just some things I saw there that I just didn't like that much at this stage, and it's very, very early, and he's a very young guy, but he's got the pedigree, but he might have to pick it up a little bit because has not looked that impressive so far.
So who do you think looked better, him or Conlon?
Conlon hasn't bowled me over yet either.
No, neither one has.
Yeah, good question. I think they've been about the same. Conlon hasn't done anything to excite me where, I would say, well, he's on a better track than Stevenson. I guess really that's a coin flip for me at this point that neither of them's, really jumped out at me. But Stevenson's only, 20 years old, so you would think he, provided, and I don't think he will necessarily, but, provided he doesn't take punishment too early or something like that at age 20, you would think he's got the upside.
Yes, sir. I agree. So transitioning into the fight before the fight, we had Alexander Gvozdyk versus Craig Baker, an American. I've been a fan of Gvozdyk. I think you have been as well. I liked what I saw here. I really like his style. Sometimes I wish he would stop so much with the pity pat stuff that you can see that him, Usyk and Lomachenko, they've got a lot of style similarities, at least in the smaller things that they do. I mean, they'll pity pat guys and then bang with a harder shot. The pull, what I mentioned on Facebook, pulling down the glove and hitting guys. I'm a big fan of the move. I mean, hey, so long as it's legal, I think it's a great way to open a guy up, and that's part of how he ended the fight, pulling the guy's left hand away from his ear and then dropping a right hand on him. My concern was his stamina a little bit. He looked a little fatigued before the finale.
I'm Vodstick's one of the fighters I'm the highest on out there, but and I don't want to be too critical. I mean, the knockout itself was impressive. I like that. That to me looked like I've seen him in the past, but the 6 rounds or so up there, I didn't think he looked as good. I disagreed a little bit with Teddy Atlas, and a lot of times I like Teddy myself. I like hearing his commentary. Usually, a lot of times I'll agree with him and I'll think he'll point something out interesting. But I think Vodstick has been more aggressive in some of his other fights. You saw what he did to Gonzalez. You saw he got Muhammadi out of there immediately. I haven't seen where he's had a problem. He's got the high KO percentage that he's not aggressive. He's not an Usyk who does have that problem to me. He doesn't hit as hard as Vodstick anyway. But I wasn't that crazy about the performance. The only thing I'll give him that I think Craig Baker has had some layoffs and things like that, and even though it was still a mismatch going in, Baker brings a hair more to the table than I think he was given credit for, though. That his fight against Edwin Rodriguez was stopped very, very quickly, very, very quickly. So you really didn't get to see what he had there. And he had a big knockout over Despania, the Cuban amateur star who flamed out. He was in his mid-30s already, but we know a lot of the other Cubans who've done well with that. But Baker was the guy that upset his apple cart originally, and they didn't even mention that on the telecast. So what I'm saying is, which you wouldn't have seen from that fight, but you might have to give Vodstick a little bit there, is that Baker did have some spoiler type power that maybe Vodstick just didn't want to take an unnecessary chance there early, but I think he probably could have gotten him out of there earlier.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think he was just too sharp for the guy, but it kind of reminded me, and I don't know if this is a fair comparison, but it kind of reminded me of Deverenchenko's fight with Kamal Russell, where you look at their records and it's not flattering per se, but there's something there, and I thought Baker was pretty good. Of course, Vodstick I think is he's a contender at this point, and 175 is loaded. So I'm having a hard time with Vodstick because I really like his style. I think he's a sharp counterpuncher. He's got sharp combinations. His accuracy is really good. He just puts them together nicely. His sense of distance, his footwork. I mean, he's got a lot going for him. But whether he's that best Eastern European, we got Beterbiev and others in there. It's hard for me to say, but he also was dropped by Karpansi, which is one of my concerns. But he looked good. He got the win, and he'll be getting a title shot, I assume, fairly soon. But who does he get? It's hard to say. But I like what I saw. He's good.
Well, there's one thing we might want to add there. He might hit the boxing lottery because you saw Andre Ward on the telecast for Top Rank. That's not a coincidence. Ward's HBO contract is expiring, and I think he's going to be becoming a free agent. I'm sure that wasn't a coincidence. If he signs with Bob Arum, if Arum wants Vodstick and Ward to fight, it very well might happen. He's going to have to pay enough, but so all of a sudden. You look at Vodstick and he's a top-ranked light heavyweight, and I'm thinking the same thing you are, that he's really one of my favorite, fighters coming on who's legitimate top 10 in an original 8 context. And then I'm thinking the same thing. Who's he going to fight? Where's he going to advance his career? And the next thing you know, Andre Ward may end up with Top Rank.
Yeah, well, I'd love to see him get a fight at the champion. I mean, I think that would be damn good. I mean, and Ward's fantastic. I mean, you and I would agree even after Crawford's recent performance, Ward is still the number one pound for pound guy in the world. But I would love to see it, and part of me wants I want to see Ward active at 175. That's my concern. Is he going to sit on the belt and make everybody wait? Or I'm anxious to see how he plays it out because if he's just going to sit on the belt, I'd prefer him to just give it up, retire or go chasing dreams at heavyweights. I hear a little of that talk going around. I'm not sure how serious it is, but I'd just like to see Gvozdyk get a chance. I'd love to see Ward stay active at 175, preferably, and I would love to see them fight. But whether that happens, of course, we'll have to wait and see. Anyways, on to the main event. All right, John. This is the one I've been waiting to talk to you about the whole night because you and I, we saw eye to eye on this the whole damn time. When a lot of the boxing world is it's unified championship, and Indongo had two upsets over good fighters in their hometown, and on and on and on. And from the get go, you and I were like, this fight isn't that good. I mean, I said it before, and again, it's not a bit about hating. It's just recognizing what I saw. I mean, when I saw him fight Ricky Burns, and he's just bigger, he's taller, he's more active. Ricky Burns started, I don't know, I can't even remember, at 126 maybe. He was a smaller man. He just didn't have the size. And honestly, if you're ranking Ricky Burns within, let's imagine that we're using 17 weight divisions, and you're ranking top 10 guys. Ricky Burns, to me, I'm not even sure he was a top 10 guy when Indongo beat him. He just held some trinket, and a lot of people put weight on that, and I just didn't understand it. The Troyanovsky win I thought was pretty good. Troyanovsky might have been caught. I'd actually like to see a rematch there. But, for me, those wins just weren't as impressive as people were saying. I saw a lot of flaws in his game going into it. He threw wide shots. He telegraphed his shots too much. He didn't feint really well. His sense of distance looked nothing like Crawford's. And again, you agreed with me the whole time. We thought the whole thing was a bit of a charade. All the titles this, all the titles that. I didn't think Indongo was even on Postal's level. In fact, Postal performed much more admirably than Indongo did. In fact, Hank Lundy was better in the early goings. Gamboa was significantly better in the early goings. And I think we were right here. I mean, the odds stated that Indongo wasn't going to be that competitive, and that's the fight we saw.
Yeah, and we said this from day one, written it continuously on social media for a few months.
I know, over and over.
Wasn't going to be competitive, and you had a lot of quote-unquote knowledgeable boxing people that really just showed blind spots and inability to analyze things. The fact is, Terrence Crawford is very, very good. In an original 8 context, I've got him as the number 3 welterweight. The title's vacant. I got him behind Spence and Thurman. He's on my top 10 pound-for-pound list. He's on everybody else's, and he probably moved up on that. But the point was, Indongo didn't belong in the same ring with him, and it was people doing a knee-jerk analysis of, well, this guy has 2 alphabet plastic belts, so he must be some sort of a formidable opponent. Now let's look at some of the things that they just simply didn't look at, that because the guy had alphabet belts. The guy had fought 20 of his 22 fights in Namibia. Now, who do you think he was fighting there? The next was, look at, now he got the first round KO over Troyanovsky. Troyanovsky, a good fighter, but Troyanovsky would not have cracked an original 8 top 10. He would have at 140, but it was a one-punch situation, which, yeah, sure, you've got to give Indongo some credit for it, but to me what stood out about it, where I just was a little suspect of it, is Indongo's only had a 50% KO percentage going in the last night, 11 knockouts in 22 fights. So he's not a puncher. So he scored a one-punch knockout over Troyanovsky, but you don't want to be like you're taking away from the guy, but let's face it, what does that tell you? That tells you that it was the boxing equivalent of just, a wild punch, a black swan. It reminded me 30 years ago when Doug DeWitt had a rock chin and had gone the distance with Thomas Hearns and everybody, and it was an ESPN fight. I think he fought this guy, Quinones, who wasn't a puncher and had a mediocre record, and the guy cranked one up and caught DeWitt on the button and laid him out. And DeWitt had fought all these brutal punchers and never even been rocked. And the guy was never heard from again. It was just, a crazy one-shot deal. A lot of that, I always learned a lot over the years reading stuff from Emanuel Stewart. And, one of the first times I really thought about that concept was right after Lennox Lewis got knocked out in the first fight by Rockman, and Emanuel Stewart said, no, it wasn't that he wasn't in great shape like everybody's saying and things like that, or that anything's wrong with him, but Rockman just got one perfect shot in there, and that won't happen again. And I was fortunate enough to be at the rematch, and Lewis did the same thing to Rockman. So there were just signs, and the final sign to me also, Indongo is 34 years old. Now, the guy had 22 fights, and he was 34 years old. Wasn't even mentioned by all these quote-unquote knowledgeable boxing people. And the odds makers, again, they get paid. They got to be right. It doesn't mean they're always right, but they're going to be right more than you are. And they had Crawford a massive favorite. But you had quote-unquote knowledgeable boxing people talking about this competitive fight for 4 belts.
Didn't we see that on the comments for the Ring magazine? Remember, you said it wasn't going to be a competitive fight, and you had 2 guys jump all over you like you were smoking crack or something.
Yeah, that they said that I needed to check my information. That was classic.
Well, where'd they get their? We can look back on that now and ask them where they got their information. I tried to draw one of them out, but silence.
Yeah, all we could hear was crickets. Those guys will never be heard from again. But
no.
Well, it's just a point of you have to look at the alpha. This goes along to our bigger theme that we talk about every week, because it should be talked about every week. Do not use alphabet titles as a basis to analyze the worth of a fighter. Analyze the worth of a fighter on other things. Certainly do not do that by who the alphabet organizations declare is or is not a champion. That is a crazy way to analyze a fighter.
Yeah, I agree. Well, the problem is so many people have gotten sucked into this whole alphabet soup nonsense. And I don't mean to, I'm not going to call anybody out. Well, forget it. So after that fight, you had Douglas Fisher, who seems like a nice guy, and I've got a lot of respect for him. And I know we've talked about this before. Well, what does he post on Twitter? Wow, fantastic event. The belts matter. You had Steve Kim change his Twitter handle to Belts Matter, some crap like that, like Steve Belts Matter. And you've got others. You've got Rick Glazer, who tried telling me today that, the belts matter, case closed, et cetera, et cetera. I don't know if this would be proper. I don't know if it's, it feels like Stockholm Syndrome almost, that, the alphabet soup organizations, are captors. And, people have kind of agreed that, oh, yeah, this is right. This does seem to be necessary, right? Yeah, you've convinced me. I just, in the rationale for this, from the arguments that I've been in, and, again, I don't mind having a disagreement. I consider myself a civil person. I'm not much for yelling at anybody, getting emotional and whatnot. But you have people telling me that, okay, so the belts, what do? They let people become multi-division belt holders. Well, okay, and that proves what with Ricky Burns and Adrian Broner. I mean, neither one of those guys were ever ever anything like Crawford is to his division. Okay, they also say, oh, well, sometimes they do good, right? Sometimes we get events like this where you'll have all of the alphabet soup organizations come together and crown somebody a unified champion. Well, the problem with that is these organizations are almost always actively trying to defer that. They're trying to make sure that people are not unifying titles. I mean, it seems like every once in a while you'll have like, an Indongo case where, he got 2 of them, or, you'll have somebody maybe even pick up 3 like Golovkin, but look how long it's taken him to collect these damn things. And of course, Billy Joe Saunders still has one. I'm not sure why we should give a shit, but you had it all plastered all over ESPN. Oh, it's been 11 years since something like this has happened. Well, isn't that a reason enough not to care about any of that stuff? I mean, should we be waiting 11 years for events like this? And should we be waiting 11 years for events like Crawford-Indongo? No, I don't think so at all. In fact, I think this tells me more that we should be ignoring these sorts of, alphabet soup organizations and their, picking of winners and whatnot. Some of the other rationale for it is what they enforce mandatories. Sometimes they make you fight a good guy. Okay, well, most of the times they don't. Oftentimes they let you fight fringe guys who wouldn't be in anybody's, original top 10. It's all just a load of bullshit to me. And I just don't understand.
Who has the WBC made Adonis Stevenson fight?
Exactly. I mean, the guy's gone, 2-3 years without fighting anybody worth note. I mean, Fonfara was a good fighter, but nobody I know is clamoring for was ever clamoring for a Fonfara Stevenson fight. I just don't understand the rationale. I mean, maybe Stockholm Syndrome is not really the right term to use, but I'm just kind of in awe of so many, boxing big shots who are, at peace with this when really, these organizations are obscenely corrupt. I don't know. So you look at, professional football. Let's use that example. A lot is made about the concussions and, the CTE study that came out not long ago. Remember when the refs in NBA were caught, betting on games and whatnot? Those are like mortal sins for a lot of these fans. Like, and I hear a lot of them, I'm never going to watch NBA again. It's fixed, et cetera, et cetera. But you have these alphabet organizations in boxing constantly doing acts that, put the NBA refs thing to shame. I mean, we see poor political decisions just about every month. That's how bad it is. But everybody somehow, for some reason, is trying to justify the existence. I don't get it, man.
I don't get it at all either. And heck, I respect guys like Steve Kim, Douglas Fisher, like you mentioned. Heck, I've been reading Steve Kim since he was with Boxing Update and Flash, which was a great insider-type publication. And going back to, I hate to admit it, the pre-internet days when they had to mail it to you once a week, and it came out of California. And I like what, Doug Fisher has done, editing The Ring. And when people criticize it because it was owned by Golden Boy, I've defended The Ring a lot because I've just tried to look at what they've done. If I saw any evidence of any corruption in their ratings or anything like that, but they've kept it above board as far as I'm concerned so far. So I was glad that Golden Boy kept the magazine alive. I think it's good for boxing. Some of that criticism of The Ring I don't understand, because I think they've done a decent job considering that they are owned by Golden Boy of being independent and writing about other fighters. But I'm with you. For guys that have been with boxing that long, and what was great traditionally about the boxing magazines, The Ring, and some of the other ones that don't exist anymore, was that they used to ridicule the alphabets. I mean, the way I was raised to follow boxing, and I'll still believe it to this day, was that you ignored the alphabet organizations. They were what was ruining boxing, and you could only have one champ in a division, and that's the way it was supposed to be. And that philosophy is right. And there's always been all kinds of corruption, sad and laughable at the same time. To try to make a case to defend this stuff, if Top Rank's trying to hype a fight and ESPN's hyping a fight, they shouldn't do this. But it's just like the NFL hyping their product a lot of times. When they're on NBC and ESPN and CBS and Fox. It doesn't mean it should happen. I mean, we'd like to get back to the days where you had some objective television sports journalism, but those days seem to be long gone for the most part. But still, for fighters that aren't even aren't or shouldn't be connected with those particular factions, to be trying to defend this when it's one of the things that's absolutely killed the sport is beyond me. One of the things you've got to look at that's absurd, trying to defend these organizations. First, you've got the corrupt angle. Then you've got the fact that they don't rank the other organizations champions. So they're quote-unquote mandatory challengers when they were always bad anyway, even when you had quote-unquote only 2 champions. They're not even most of the time in the top 4 in the division. So what is the quote-unquote mandatory nowadays? How dangerous of an opponent can be selected with when you put the politics together with the fact that they don't rank the other organization's champions, and that's when you've got the WBA recognizing 2 champions in each of the 17 divisions.
Yeah, you have people defending the trinkets, saying, oh well, sometimes we get things like this, sometimes we get mandatory, sometimes the alphabet soup organizations make guys fight. Okay, but who wants to see Joshua Pulev? Who wants to see Ricky Burns versus Kirill Relic? Who wants to see Michelle DeRocho versus Ricky Burns for a vacant alphabet soup? Who wants to see Adrian Broner versus Alla Kaverdiev? I mean, the examples.
How about Jermel Charlo versus Charles Hatley? Did anybody ask for that one? That was a guy who hadn't fought for a year that was still the WBC's number 1 154-pound contender. They produce 50 mismatches with their quote-unquote mandatories for every one good fight they force for you. So on the whole, it hurts boxing. And I think where they try to sell you on this argument is, well, the fighters care. And here's always my response to that is, if we all got behind the ring belt or we all got behind the transnational belt and fighters sensed that was what the fans and the boxing journalists cared about, I got news for you. All of a sudden the fighters wouldn't be worried about fighting for the IBF or the WBO or the WBC or the WBA belt. They'd be worried about fighting for the ring belt or who the transnational champion was. The fighters, and this is perfectly understandable, I don't blame them. They're in the most dangerous sport with a short career in their prime. They're going to go where the money. They're going to go where the money is and where the prestige is. And if the people with boxing as a sport at this point with hardcore followers for the most part, we've lost our casual fans, which is a shame, but that's the reality. So some fans know more than others, but you don't have this broad, quote-unquote, casual fan base. If the fan base and the boxing journalists start recognizing other champions and that becomes the big fight, the alphabets will just go away, and that's always the way it has been. So, I never buy this argument that, well, the fighters really care about these belts, and you hear so-and-so talking about the WBC green belt. If everybody else shifted their attention away, it wouldn't matter. Is anybody going to not respect Canelo Alvarez if he beats Gennady Golovkin in September because Canelo Alvarez doesn't pick up the WBC green belt? Nobody's going to give a damn about the WBC green belt. They just want to see a good fight between the 2 best middleweights, which is what they're getting. They don't care about the WBC green belt.
Yeah, exactly. And I said the same thing today, actually, when I was in this debate with somebody. It's the focus may be, the WBC, WBA, whatever the hell. But again, all it takes is it's really not that difficult. I mean, if guys at the ring, transnational, which I'm a board member, already doesn't recognize the alphabet organizations. We base things on the merit of your wins and losses as opposed to whether or not you're wearing metal and plastic around your shoulder. But if guys at the ring, guys at boxing scene who gets a lot of, especially boxing scene, because that's boxing scene and the ring. I mean, I'd love to see them both go this direction. I mean, it'd be great to see. You could feel the winds of change. I don't think are that hard to get, fanning. Just ignore them. I mean, we do it time and time again. I do it in my writings. Look in my article with just about anybody. I mean, you can put things in a way that will sell regardless of the quote unquote world championship status applied to them. And not only that, if we had what I would like to see personally is I'd like to see some centralized or decentralized structure, with boxing to where you would have something like the UFC where you would have one champion per division, and then you would be forced to fight your number one guy. I mean, because nowadays, it's okay. When are we going to get to see it? I mean, it seems like it's such a rarity anymore. I mean, it seems like 2017 has been a bit better, and that's good. But boxing seems to kind of ebb and flow. So next year could be horrific, and we might not get hardly anything at all. But it's one of those things like in the UFC, that the champion is going to fight his number one contender in a timely fashion. And that's exactly why you don't see many long-term champions there. Of course, it's the stylistic variance as well, but it's also the fact that because of that, they don't put so much emphasis on guys who have losses. Right? In boxing, holding your zero is a big deal anymore. In UFC, and again, I don't really watch UFC. I'm a casual fan. Sometimes I tune no fights on. Yeah, I don't know. I'll stream it or whatever. But you look at a guy like Robbie Lawler, who was a welterweight champion not long ago, and the guy had something like 12 losses, or maybe it was 10 losses as the welterweight champion. I mean, you'd be hard pressed to find a welterweight champion in many years who's had that sort of win-loss ratio. In fact, Robbie Lawler was probably hovering around a 600 win percentage. But I'd like to see that where number one guys are enforced, and that's a route we should go. That's the problem I have with a lot of these fans who are justifying the trinkets. They seem to lack foresight, and I know I've been over that a lot as well. But can't we envision a better model for boxing? And if we can, shouldn't we push for it?
I think it has to be done. I think even though the sport's been around a long time, I've seen the shriveling, in my lifetime as a fan, and I still, not even being pessimistic, I think just realistic. I believe it will continue to shrivel, despite, like you said, these ebbs and flows, unless it goes in the direction we've talked about. Because let's face it, the shriveling has occurred as more alphabet organizations and more weight classes have been created. That is not a coincidence. It's not the only reason, but it's certainly a big part of it. So, it's got to be reversed. And I agree with you. I don't think it's that difficult to reverse, but I don't think that at first it's the promoters are going to be reversing it. I think that you saw evidence, and I think. And I don't know why he wasn't back for this. Instead, again, these same a lot of the same types of people you've talked about criticizing him. The first year or so of PBC, Al Heyman was ignoring them. He wasn't mentioning the specific alphabets. But I think what happened to him is, and I don't think it's making excuses for him, I think it's reality. He has to keep his fighters happy and paid while he was also trying to make some changes in the sport, and trying to do both just became too difficult, I think, for him at a certain point. I think what you need is, like you suggested, you need the outside forces, the fans, the journalists to get it going. And then I think an enterprising promoter may say something like, hey, a lot of these hardcore fans are following, the ring champ or the transnational champ. My guy happens to be the Ring or Transnational champ. I'm going to start promoting that. And then the next thing you know, it can shift. HBO, about 20 years ago, had for a while, to their credit, and I think it was because at that time they had the better fighters who didn't need the alphabet plastic. They were ignoring some of that for a while too, but then they threw in the towel, and now they're bad with the WBO. But Showtime's always been bad. Their way to try to catch HBO, even though they've got better quality boxing on now consistently, their way going back 30 years to try to catch HBO was to justify every alphabet plastic belt that came along.
Yeah, and Mauro Ranallo is so bad with that.
Yeah, I like Mauro, but Showtime's got a history of being worse with the alphabets. That's my primary criticism of their programming, because I think it's been pretty darn good otherwise in recent years. But they have always been much worse with the alphabet stuff. But I don't think it's that hard to reverse it. I think the fighters who the promoters who have the better fighters who have the true lineal titles in the original divisions, it would be their interest when they've got those guys to start going in the direction we're saying, because then you put more pressure on your competitors who have more of the quote unquote pretenders.
Yeah, I agree. And one other thing that I would like to add is while I'm hoping that it changes for the better soon, but one thing that I would like is to see a lot of this corruption in the sport ousted. I mean, it's one thing again, and we've talked at length about this as well. Just the lack of investigative journalism in boxing. I mean, every once in a while, like I remember Thomas Hauser's article last year about the New York State Athletic Commission and some of their wrongdoings. There's not nearly enough of this. I mean, these operators are allowed to do things virtually unimpeded. I mean, you have all sorts of corrupt alphabet heads doing all sorts of corrupt stuff. You have well-known ped dealers, roaming the gyms of some of the biggest and best-known gyms in the world. I remember last year, and this didn't get much attention. I think it was last year, might have been the year before. But Vanes Martirosyan was talking about Memo Heredia, the well-known ped dealer. And he was, Vanes Martirosyan said, he was like, hey, the first time I met Memo Heredia, he offered to put me on a PED plan for like $10,000 or something. And I heard almost nothing about it. It was just one of those things that we're so used to it anymore. We've signed that pact with the devil that we just kind of brush that stuff off. I mean, the attitude amongst the sport itself has to change. But let's not get too carried away here. Let's talk about the Crawford-Indongo fight. What'd you think of Crawford's performance?
I loved Crawford's performance because one thing, I mean, I like Terrence Crawford overall. I think he's real and certainly it's something to be respected. Again, if you're ranking 8 divisions at welterweight, titles vacant, I've got him number 3 behind only Thurman and Spence, and that's certainly one of the best divisions in boxing. What I like about Terrence Crawford, besides his overall skill set, which is obviously very good, is that when he's got an overmatched opponent, he gets rid of him. He's not. There were times early in his career where I thought maybe he was being a little cautious against Ray Beltran, but I revised my opinion a little bit when I saw Ray Beltran brought a little bit more power and had become a little bit better of a fighter than I thought earlier in his career. And outside of that Beltran fight, he's gotten rid of a lot of these other people. Postol was able to go the distance with him, but Terrence Crawford, he's not content to let the guy go the distance when he's got him overmatched, and I like that about him. I think that's a bit of a throwback. He's been credited with that, and I agree with that opinion that's a bit of a throwback. And he got Indongo right out of there. He had Indongo down almost immediately, and then stopped him, with the body shot. I'm not saying. I mean, Teddy Atlas, Tessitore, Andre Ward. We're all saying that Indongo wasn't looking too enthusiastic right from the opening bell. So that's not me saying it. And I think everybody can respect Andre Ward if he says it, and because that's been what we saw. I mean, Indongo just he just did not. He just got overwhelmed right off the bat, and didn't look like Omaha, Nebraska was a place he was happy to be. We've learned one thing, that again, these people with the analysis, when you're on the road against Ricky Burns, it's a lot different than being on the road against Terrence Crawford, and you saw that last night.
Yeah, you definitely did. I mean, I agree. I mean, Indongo didn't look that comfortable from the outset, and I don't know, maybe it was a bit of the crowd, but I mean, I think early on it was Crawford. I mean, he realized very quickly that he was in with a different animal, and I mean, and for me it was a lot of people who thought Indongo would fare well, they cited his size, but as you can see, Crawford was the much sharper puncher, much better with his timing. I like some of his counters. There wasn't a lot of punches that were thrown in the first two rounds, but Crawford, he felt like he found his timing pretty quickly. And I think Indongo was probably pretty surprised himself because Crawford has pretty long arms. Indongo's not used to fighting somebody not only who's a southpaw, but somebody who's about his size. So, again, that's part of what I saw in the mismatch, and that's part of the way it played out. But I did like the body shot. I always like to see guys finish guys with body shots. It was a really nice counter to the stomach there, and Indongo looked like he was in some serious pain.
Yeah, well, one thing also I like a lot about Terrence Crawford, and you alluded to it, is Terrence Crawford dominated Victor Postol, who was a very tall fighter for the weight class. And he blew away Julius Indongo, who's also a very tall fighter for the weight class. That's become a lost art, in recent decades in boxing, is somebody simply who can handle a taller opponent like that. And, Terrence Crawford's 5'8". He does have long arms, but, Indongo 5'11", and Postol even bigger than that. And, he handled both guys easily. That shows, he fought a smaller guy like Gamboa and was able to handle him, and then you see him handling these taller guys. That's showing a lot of boxing technique ability going to your fundamentals when he can chop down a taller opponents like that and really take control of the fight so quickly, like you said, not even have to take rounds to find his range or get his timing down, just to be dominant in a quick fashion against taller opponents like that. In this era especially is very impressive. Of course, we're talking about completely different styles, but it is one thing you notice if you've watched a lot of boxing for a long time or studied the history. There aren't a lot of successful Joe Frazier types nowadays, and you used to see more guys like that, but you're not seeing that much anymore. In other words, a smaller opponent that because of technique and style and finding a way is able to chop down bigger, taller individuals.
Yeah, well, and I like how Crawford stuck with his jab because if you're a smaller guy, that's one thing they tell you. If you're gonna disrupt a taller man's game plan, you got to get your jab in there, step in, and I mean he wasn't really stepping in so much. Of course, when he was letting off power shots, he would, but he was really using his jab to get Indongo to lead, with a power shot. And Indongo obliged far too much, and that was part of my problem with him going in. I mean, Crawford is just too wily for the guy, and that was proven there. And to be honest with you, and I know it sounds a bit self-serving, but I was hoping that Crawford would get him out of there early so we could all kind of see that, hey, this fight was not, what the hype was about. Indongo was a good fighter, but nowhere near Crawford's level. So that's just what I was hoping. I don't know about you.
Yeah, well, that's what I like about Terrence Crawford, because I sense, again, in more recent era of boxing, that you almost would get a guy in Crawford's position who would almost allow that to happen just to be able to put that spin on him himself. For example, like Crawford, would get in there and see that he had Indongo overmatched, but he would just flick out a jab, over the course of 12 rounds and win a comfortable decision, 10 rounds to 2 or something like that. Never try to finish Indongo. Terrence Crawford, and then tell the boxing media after the fight in ESPN that Indongo was a very difficult opponent, and that's how he won 2 belts. et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Crawford is not content to do that. He will get his man out of there, even though he's obviously a boxer. He's not a slugger, but he'll get his man out of there. To me, that is, Max Kellerman had alluded to that. I think he went a little far when he said he's like a Roberto Duran. I don't go that far, but Terrence Crawford is a throwback to me in the sense, though, that of past eras and glory days where, you're a championship caliber fighter and you got some guy overmatched. You're looking to get him out of there. You're not looking to coast or jab or say that this guy was tough, I had to be careful. You're getting the guy out of there, building your own stock, giving the fans a knockout. And Terrence Crawford's been doing that a lot, and I think he deserves the credit that he does get for that.
I agree. So 2 questions. Does Crawford move up the pound-for-pound rankings? Because I believe he's number 3 on most lists, well, at least going into the fight. So does he move up? Where does he belong on the pound-for-pound list, and where does he go from here?
I mean, he's worthy of moving up. For me, right now I've got Golovkin at number 2, I believe, in the last one I made. That's where, in a lot of my stuff, even rankings, you're used to rankings coming out a lot, but I've come to think it's almost good to wait a little bit. In other words, I wouldn't want to move Crawford ahead of Golovkin until I see what happens, with Golovkin and Alvarez, and then, get that into the equation. So Crawford, he's up there. He's definitely up there. He's definitely up there for me. If somebody, had him too, I probably, wouldn't argue with it. As well as he's fought, though. Again, with the 17 division context, that's, he was the legit lightweight champion. Completely give him credit for that. To me, in an original 8 context, and we only need 8 to 9 divisions. Nobody's going to convince me any differently than that. He's not a champion at welterweight yet, and I think that does matter. That's, again, where as good as Terrence Crawford is, you can't get carried away with the alphabet stuff with all the weight classes and all the belts. It doesn't mean Terrence Crawford's not very good. He is very good. He's certainly in my top 10 pound for pound. He's probably in the top 5 pound for pound right now. And if somebody wants to put him up 2 or something, I'm not really going to necessarily argue with that. But did I see a guy, in my opinion, did I see a guy Saturday night that would beat Errol Spence? No, I did not. Keith Thurman and Terrence Crawford would be a heck of a fight. I think that one would probably be close to even money with Crawford as a slight favorite. But again, the odds makers know. People can say, well, Spence has only fought Kell Brook and all this kind of stuff, but the odds makers know, and this is the test to me people should use. If Terrence Crawford was going to fight Errol Spence tomorrow at 147, we both know that's not going to happen with Spence being with PBC and Crawford being with Top Rank, and he had fought on HBO and Spence fights on Showtime. But let's just say it was going to happen. Is Terrence Crawford going to be a favorite over Errol Spence? I don't think he is. I don't think he is.
Yeah, well, and while using some of the logic I hear, well, maybe we'll get them to work together and maybe we can have the fight. I mean, that's the the thing that I don't like thinking about the fight itself is, can we get these political parties who are kind of at odds with each other, do we get them to make that fight? Well, I'm hoping so. I mean, I think Crawford is going to be at 147. Unfortunately, I think he's going to have to deal with at least a fodder fight first, and I consider, a guy like somebody under Top-ranked stable, Saddam Ali, Jesse Vargas. To me, that's fodder. I mean, even if Pacquiao, let's say Pacquiao beats Horn, or it doesn't really matter who wins. I don't think either one of those guys is competitive with Crawford either. So for me, I just kind of want to skip through the nonsense and let's just see if we can get the Keith Thurman fight, the Errol Spence fight. The problem is trying to look into the future. We do have to deal with these political factions, and they're not necessarily anxious to get to the negotiating table. So In an ideal world, I'd love to see Crawford fight the best of the best as soon as possible. I mean, he could probably fight Spence really soon without the nonsense, but my guess is that Keith Thurman and Errol Spence is probably the big fight that PBC wants to make, and Crawford will probably he'll have to beat up whoever Top Rank gives him until that opportunity presents itself. And unfortunately, it might be, a year, even 2 years, maybe even more until we get something like that. But, it's not so troublesome in the sense that, if Keith Thurman fights Errol Spence, that crowns a new champion. You agree with that, right?
Yeah, that to me, Keith Thurman fights Errol Spence, which is I agree with you, very likely to happen. That's a new welterweight champ. So
right, and let them fight Crawford.
Yeah, right, that's going to be the champ. And again, if people would recognize these kind of things, that would put more pressure on Crawford and Top Rank to try to get that fight made. I think instead the route they'll probably take, you just reminded me of it because I've been taking it since Horn got the decision. Bob Arum and HBO, frankly, if they end up doing business again, which I wouldn't doubt it depending on the fight, Arum at this point is probably, that apparently the Pacquiao rematch is going to be in Australia, and he's probably at this point hoping Horn's going to get a decision in that rematch, and then I think he will sacrifice Horn to Crawford because I just looking at Jeff Horn's fight, and Top Rank has got knowledgeable people behind the scenes. That's how they know who to protect their guys with who they're matching them up with, and things like that. And I would think that they're aware that Jeff Horn's shelf life is not going to be too long in the legit top 10 of the division, and as an alphabet belt holder, and that sacrificing him to Terrence Crawford, maybe in Australia even, to get Crawford a nice payday. That would certainly, to me, be on Top Rank's radar screen for 2018.
Yeah, like a lamb to slaughter. Anyways, let's talk about some boxing news. What do you got on your mind?
One thing I've got on my mind is a couple things. Again, getting back to the odds theme a little bit, but I think it's very interesting because, again, this is just something that, to me, the people in the know are doing. You look at Huey Fury and Joseph Parker, which is just about even money. And my theme here is the drop in stock of two legitimate top 10 fighters, Joseph Parker at heavyweight and Billy Joe Saunders at middleweight, which they're both still in my original 8 top 10, even though they haven't been impressive lately. Parker is even money, in New Zealand with a totally unproven Huey Fury. And Billy Joe Saunders is only a minus 240 favorite over Willie Monroe Jr. I mean, that is, to me, just a huge stock drop. I mean, I would not have even thought that Billy Joe Saunders' stock had dropped that much. And, again, the odds, it doesn't mean Saunders isn't going to win, but, the odds makers have to know. And for Willie Monroe Jr. to be that close and for Parker to be even money with Huey Fury, those guys' stock has really, really dropped. And I think that is so dramatic that it's worthy of note.
Well, I was just going to say, you look at Billy Joe Saunders' recent performances against, Bloyer and Lee and Kavov, or I'm not sure I'm saying that right. And, I mean, really, there wasn't a whole lot to be impressed about. And so my thinking is that Billy Joe will probably get the decision, even if if it's a close fight, which I assume it will be, might be a bit boring Peck stuff, poke and peck. My guess is that even if Monroe wins, he'll probably lose, and then they'll, give Billy up to somebody bigger, maybe like a David Lemieux. I wouldn't mind seeing that.
No, that wouldn't be bad. I think you've said it before, and again, going with the plastic belt thing, because we really don't need it. You would figure he's just trying to hang on to leverage that WBO plastic belt for a shot at the Alvarez Golovkin winner. But, I don't think the way he's performed lately that he deserves it. So, and I don't think the Willie Monroe Jr. fight, no matter which way it goes, is going to change that. So I'd like to see, the winner of Golovkin and Canelo Alvarez do something else. But I think another thing worthy of note, and I'm tempted to get into the Customato Teddy Atlas school a little bit here on the psychology of it is, it does not tell you exactly what's going to happen, of course, but I would think Golovkin boosters have to be concerned with the fact that he weighed in at 170 pounds at the WBC 30-day weigh-in. Comparably, he weighed in at 163 for Dominic Wade. And why I talk about the Customato Teddy Atlas school of thought is as good as Golovkin has been so far, and getting knockouts. He's 35 years old, and you wonder somewhere behind the scenes, was there maybe a slight loss of confidence or something with Canelo Alvarez being a younger guy? And what I'm alluding to is an excuse being built up in his own mind, where he's just not in as good a shape as he normally is. Because people in boxing nowadays, they get way too caught up with the size and weight. They overrate it, and I myself would not buy the fact that Golovkin's at 170 because he wants to have more weight for Canelo Alvarez or something like that, especially because Alvarez is going to be the faster fighter as it is. Golovkin can't afford to slow up too much. I think that weight has to be a concern.
Yeah, and it's hard to say why exactly that is. I mean, you would think if you're Golovkin's handlers that you would try to come in as light as possible. I mean, that's what I would do, because in Golovkin is a bit, and I think Golovkin's been past his prime for years. I mean, I don't know very many fighters who have been at their best at 35 years old, especially a guy with his track record in the amateurs and, as an aggressor. I mean, aggressors fizzle out quicker than boxers do. I mean, Golovkin seems to have a good brain, but again, when you're an aggressor, it's just a different story than when you're a boxer. I don't know. I mean, I remember when Golovkin came in. I remember when he came in a bit heavier because Rubio didn't make the weight, and to me, he looked pretty damn slow in that fight. And there's been a few other fights where he's come in heavier, and he's looked, in my opinion, he's looked heavier. So, I mean, if it was me, I would boil down Golovkin to, he makes 160 pretty comfortably most of the time. So, I mean, 158 or so. And, I wouldn't have him put much weight on after the fact. But I don't know. It's interesting. And I'm not exactly sure why people haven't mentioned it, because, if you look at where he was at now compared to where he was with other fighters, he was significantly lighter. I mean, I remember he was way lower than Willie Monroe was at, in the weigh-ins. And I don't know. People haven't really brought that up. I mean, people, from what I hear, they're like, oh, he's just right on track. Well, I don't know. Is he?
Yeah, I think a lot of people are missing a big story there. Now, some did catch it to their credit, but not many, and it hasn't been talked about enough. What I think, here's where, to me, it gets away from the essence of Golovkin, because sometimes these guys get credit for that, sometimes they don't. One thing that you've really got to give Bernard Hopkins and Floyd Mayweather, and I've always given both of those guys this, and I'll always give them that, because especially at their age, it's very hard to do that. Again, the Customato Teddy Atlas school, the mental part. It's hard to make yourself do that when you're older. Floyd Mayweather and Bernard Hopkins were always in shape. And see, I always put Golovkin, and you and I have even talked about this in the past, I always put Golovkin in that same category. To me, he was like a Floyd Mayweather or a Bernard Hopkins in that sense. He was always in much better shape than his opponents as you saw the fight approaching. It signified the discipline, that he never was undisciplined and let himself get out of shape. Again, just like Hopkins and Mayweather, who amazingly, to both of their credits, did it their whole career. And Golovkin had done it his whole career. And now, with the biggest fight of his life coming up, you actually have evidence that he's not doing it, and that's where you don't want to overrate the mental game, but I think it's what you said, 35 years old, things do change, and it might be just where part of the mental game there that for whatever something's happened where he's giving himself a reason, or just sometimes, again, even if it is the biggest fight of your life and you're 35 years old, sometimes your mind can just change with those types of things, and it's something that probably has to be paid attention to.
Maybe, and I don't know if there's a possibility that they're fabricating the weight. I mean, it could have been possible that Golovkin drank a bunch of water beforehand to try and you never know with these fighters. You never know what sort of hoops they'll jump through to try and get under somebody's skin. I don't know if he just like drank a bunch of water before weighing in, or if he's legitimately in not as good shape. And that's kind of why I was advocating for Golovkin to stay active before the Alvarez fight. I wish he would have taken a summer bout against Billy Joe Saunders, knocked him out, and then moved on to the Alvarez fight, because for me that's what I'm going to always remember Golovkin at his best. When he was fighting 3-4 times a year, he was trying to get a top 10 guy every time. A lot of times, unfortunately, he didn't get a lot of the good fights that he wanted earlier in his career, but he was staying active, knocking guys out. And he was just always in the gym. I remember listening to Tom Loeffler saying like, oh, well, we'd like to bring his work rate down from 4 to 3, and eventually they start doing it. And I even heard, even a year ago that, Golovkin would still prefer to fight, 4 times a year, but they think with the level of opponents that he's getting now that, 2, maybe 3 fights is good enough for him. And again, the 3-4 fights early in his career was an excellent way of marketing himself. I mean, fighting, the East Coast, the West Coast, out in Monaco from time to time. I thought it was fantastic, and I thought they did a great job with him. I mean, you wouldn't expect a guy from Kazakhstan to do much in America in terms of popularity because, he's from Kazakhstan. I mean, a lot of people. A lot of Americans would probably just conflate that with the Soviet Union and, call him Russian and be done with it. But I don't know. That is interesting to think about how, it might affect the fight itself or whatnot. But, and another thing, too, is I almost forgot. Golovkin has actually been mentioning retirement for a couple of years now. I remember he did a radio show, I think it was in L.A., and they asked him, about boxing. Is it what he loves? Is this what he wants to do? And he said, I love my job, but, there are other things that he would like to pursue. So, maybe Golovkin, maybe he's lost a fire a little bit. In boxing, all it takes is a little bit for you to lose it and for you to end up with an L, a 1 in your loss column or 2 or whatever it is. But I don't know. It's tough to say. But
yeah,
I suppose
again, it might be. But I have one thing I have learned is not to pick fights solely on something like that. In other words, it just should be something that you consider when you're making your call. You don't want to do it on that alone, but it's something that should be baked into your calculations.
Right. Yeah, and sometimes that happens to be the number one reason why a guy loses. I remember I wrote an article on Yuri Arbachakov, and he to Cyber Boxing Zone, and I think they do a really good job of keeping track of all the guys who are the man, the man of the man, and they had Yuri Arbachakov as the the flyweight champion for a while, and if you look at the Ring's annual rankings, they didn't end up putting him on top. I think he deserved it personally. But you had him fighting for years, and he looked really, really good. But, eventually he just kind of lost it and wanted to do other things with his life. I mean, and he ended up losing to a guy he had already beaten, I think it was a year before or 2 years before, fairly clearly. So, I mean, you never know. I mean, it's certainly worth putting it into your calculus when you're crunching the numbers and trying to predict a winner. But my news for the week is, the Crawford. I want to congratulate him on an excellent victory. But from what I'm hearing, and I don't want to jump the gun, but this is a fight that I'm personally excited about, one that I've been advocating for a while, and I hope it's at 126. But the rumor mill has it at 130. I'm hearing that Lomachenko and Rigondeaux are going to fight at Madison Square Garden December 9th. That's a fight that I like. I don't know how you feel about it, especially if it is at 130.
I wanted that fight for a long time at featherweight. I thought that would have been a perfect fight to crown a true original 8, division featherweight champion. It's a little bit late for me, but I've always been of the school of thought that when a fight's coming along a little late, I'd still rather have the two fighters fight than not fight. I'd still rather see it. So I've never expected to be an exciting fight, but these are two guys that probably have some trouble getting some other opponents. They're both very skilled. So I thought it was a natural for them to fight. I would prefer it even now to be at 126. Apparently it's going to be at 130 for the WBO plastic there, which, again, we don't need that to make this fight significant. And there's talk, which this is kind of a funny thing because, it's good for hardcore boxing fans to, get to see it maybe if they don't have HBO or Showtime. I think a lot of them probably do because you've had to see boxing that way for so many, really even decades now. It's going to be on ESPN, but the thing that is a catch-22 about that is we like this fight as hardcore followers of the sport and want to see it, but it is not a good fight for the casual fan. So I don't know exactly how this fight plays on ESPN. Lomachenko's, there was a lot going against him with the time the fight came on and being delayed by the NFL Hall of Fame speeches. But, for free TV, Lomachenko's rating in his last bout there was not good against an inferior opponent. And Rigondeaux, well, obviously a much better opponent, does not have an exciting style. I think it's still, even at this point, it's still a fight that's worth both guys taking and hardcore followers of the sport paying attention to, but it's probably coming a couple of years too late.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I'm like you. I would have loved to have seen it at 126, but when I look at the options, when I look at the landscape out there, and you see what's at 126, Santa Cruz, Frampton, Russell Jr. Lomachenko obviously conquered Russell Jr. in his third bout, and I really don't think anything would be different if they fought today. I think Lomachenko is significantly better than he was when they fought in his third fight. And I think Russell's a better fighter, too. And I actually might favor Russell over Frampton and Santa Cruz. The problem with these folks is, they are PBC. So that's part of the reason why Lomachenko made his move up, because he couldn't get those fights. And then, Bob Arum was feeding him who he had. Oscar Valdez wasn't available at the time. He was still an up-and-comer. There just weren't very many options. The Salido fight didn't seem to pan out. So for me, when I look at the options out there, I actually think, aside from Mikey Garcia, I think this is the best available opponent for Lomachenko. I would have liked to have seen the Salido fight too, and I don't think that fight's all that competitive anymore. But if there's something that people hold against Lomachenko, if there's some smidgen of hope for his doubters, it's that Salido roughed him up and introduced him to the pro game, et cetera, et cetera. That's the one thing they dangle over his head. So I think that's still going to be on the menu for Lomachenko. A lot of us would just like to see him redeem himself against that. Even though I don't think that would be much of a competition. But I think the Rigondeaux fight is probably his second best option. I mean, I'd like to see Santa Cruz and Frampton and maybe even Gary Russell Jr. again. Burchelt would be okay. Linares I would really like to see. Linares and Rigondeaux are kind of neck and neck for me, though. I actually think Rigondeaux is more skilled than Linares. Sorry. So for me, this is the second best option for Lomachenko, and I'd love to see it. Two wonderful amateurs. I'm going to pick an early winner. I've said this for years now. I think Lomachenko beats him. I think he's just as skilled. I think he's a bit more versatile. I think he's tougher. And I think he's bigger. I just think I'm not saying he would stop Rigondeaux, but I certainly think he beats him. I think he beats him fairly clearly. But it's a great fight, and I hope it happens.
Yeah, I think Lomachenko's got too much offense for him. And, I hope it's, Bob Arum has these techniques that he always seems to use where, Crawford performed very, very well, but in terms of competitiveness, there's some stench about the Indongo fight, and there certainly was a lot of stench from Lomachenko and Mariaga. So he tends to throw out these future fights, right before or right after one of those moments, and I'm hoping that that's not the case here. So far, the reports have seemed to say that this is happening, but I agree with you. I just think Lomachenko has too much offense for Rigondeaux, and I felt that even if they would have fought at featherweight a couple of years ago. When you look at the two, Lomachenko's just the skill set, like you said, similar, but Lomachenko's got better offense. And I think that I always felt that would be the difference when they fought. And you got to look at Rigondeaux's age now, too. He's 36 years old in a low weight class. How long can even he hang on at that point? Usually with that defensive type of a specialist, what I see a lot of times is when they get older is the offense just disappears. It just shrivels. And, you could find that from Rigondeaux in a Lomachenko fight.
Yeah, well, and to Rigondeaux's credit, he did look. I know the result was controversial, but he looked far above his opponent. I mean, that contest, well, it looked like no contest. So I think this is a damn good fight, and I'm looking forward to it. Anyways, you got any final words?
Yeah, the final words, of course, can't ignore it. We got Mayweather-McGregor less than a week away now. In terms of attention, there was an article in the news section about it in the New York Post today, and an article in the sports section by former president of boxing writers, Tony Page, who was always an excellent writer, and he's against it. He wrote his column kind of against it today, even though we're less than a week away. He still does an overnight sports talk show on FAN in New York as well. So, but to me, what was even more telling about that, and I think boxing fans need to remember this, is there was nothing in the papers about Crawford-Indongo, and it wasn't just because of the late result in the actual old school paper. There was nothing the day before either. What I'm saying here is they weren't going to report on Crawford-Indongo whether Mayweather-McGregor was happening this coming Saturday or not. And that is my whole point of why, even if you don't like Mayweather-McGregor, boxing needs all the attention it can get, and just hope something good comes out of this, because Crawford-Indongo was on ESPN, and New York's always been a traditional boxing area, of course, going back decades, all the history and everything. Even there, of course, we all know it's not like it used to be, but when you had Crawford-Indongo, and they're not even getting an article on the day of the fight, you need all the help you can get. And here I see big articles on Mayweather-McGregor today. So I still think boxing fans have got to hope for the best. I lean towards thinking boring Mayweather decision. That is not necessarily going to be great for boxing, except for Mayweather winning, he being the boxer. But look, life can be hard to predict, and I'm just saying let's hope something unpredictable that is good for boxing comes out of this Saturday night. Yeah,
I mean, even if it's a wide decision and Mayweather gets knocked down or legitimately hurt, I get that would garner some attention. Well, and we're also hoping that some MMA fans will they'll see the finer craft that guys like Mayweather exhibit. Maybe we'll have some converts. I mean, I know a guy personally who used to be a big MMA fan, and then he moved to boxing and got into it and started to understand the sort of stuff, the nuance and whatnot. What I'm hoping is we'll have some converts. Unfortunately, when they jump into boxing and they look at the rankings and hear about all the alphabet soup organizations, it's going to look like a destructured mess to them, and they're going to ask themselves, they're going to put their hands in the air and shrug their shoulders, and ask what the hell's going on here. But hopefully they can, I don't know, I guess they'll just have to sign that pact with the devil like we have and get used to it. But with that said, again, I'm going to plug in our sponsors, Power Plus Mouth Guards, Replenishing Care Technologies. I want to thank everybody who tunes in, week out, especially Rob Day. He's a good guy. I've known him for years. Wrote with him over at Ring News 24. He's been following us for a long, long time. I think he catches every episode. Denise Wards is also somebody I'd like to give a shout-out to. We appreciate your support. And, John, once again, it was fun to be on with you.
You too, Jeremiah, and I agree with you. Thanks to Rob and Denise and everybody that followed the podcast. And of course, it's been a long time. We're going to wrap it up. But I do agree with your sentiments. Let's hope Saturday night is some kind of night where boxing can get some converts from some of those MMA fans that purchased the pay-per-view.
Exactly. Like you said, we need all the help we can get. Anyways, for your host, Jeremiah J. Preisser, this is John Einreinhofer. Have a good night.